So, um, so I want to welcome everybody. Now that we've been through the shared trauma experience, uh, for those of you, I think just Jane, actually, we got Zoom hacked, and it was not pleasant. But we managed to restart the Zoom and kick people out, and are just being very wary of everything. Um, for So I want to welcome everybody to today's um, our Religion Communicators Council's professional development webinar. Just for a little background as to the RCC, the Religion Communicators Council was founded in 1929, and it's an association of communications professionals who work for and with a diverse group of faith-based organizations in the areas of communications, public relations, advertising, and development. The RCC provides opportunities for communicators to learn from each other, such as today's webinar. And together, RCC members promote excellence in the communication of faith and values in the public arena and encourage understanding among religious and faith groups. Typically with the RCC, because we are all faith-based organizations, we like to have a moment of centering before we launch into our presentation of the day or to our meetings. And I think, especially given what happened 15 minutes ago, it would be a good thing to do. So let's just take a moment and get centered, and so that we can give our undivided attention to Dr. Shanta in a minute. Thank you so much. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Shanta Premawardhana to you today. Dr. Shanta, or Dr. Premawardhana, serves as the president of the OMNIA Institute for Contextual Leadership. And just to give you some background to that, OMNIA trains, coaches, and consults with religious institutions, religious leaders, and people of faith to build power, collaborate across differences, and work effectively to counter religious extremism and other injustices legitimized by religion. Over the last 2 years, OMNIA has trained over 1,500 religious leaders in northeastern Nigeria, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and the United States, and has built over 60 Interfaith Peacemaker teams. I think that the title of today's presentation was a lot more provocative, Dismantling Supremacy, than I think that it actually will be in practice. Yes, there is an element of trying to speak to the power, et cetera, but Dr. Premawardhana's main focus is, how do we build these grassroots efforts? How do we build these efforts where people are working together, where people are looking past their differences towards their commonalities, and really able to affect greater change and peace. Just a word on Dr. Premawardhana's background too. Before he joined OMNIA, he was the director of interreligious dialogue and cooperation at the World Council of Churches based in Geneva, Switzerland. I work with the WCC vis-a-vis the United Nations, and they do such really, really tremendous work. Before he was with the WCC in Geneva, he was the Associate General Secretary for Interfaith Relations at the National Council of Churches, which is now based in Washington, D.C. He earned his PhD in religion at Northwestern University and currently still resides in the Chicago area. And with that, I will turn the time over for us to learn from Dr. Premawardhana.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And thank you all for taking the time. I appreciate any opportunity to share with you about the important work we are doing, and I'm particularly enthusiastic about religion communicators because y'all are the one who get the message out. So some level, my hope is that there will be opportunities. This might raise your curiosity to learn even more and perhaps get the message out about what we do that might be useful for everybody. Somebody that I listened to recently said that when you have a good message, be generous with it. Don't hold it to yourself. So, in some sense, what I'm hoping is that this will be a generous conversation where we can get the message out. Just a couple of things about who I am. I'm originally from Sri Lanka and have lived in the United States now for 44 years. And so, really, most of the time in the Chicago area, except for a time in New York and a time in Geneva. The couple of important things to know. One is that because I come from a Buddhist context, Sri Lanka is a largely Buddhist country. My Baptist faith had to quickly, in very early times, struggle with what does it mean to live in a Buddhist context, and how do we manage that the exclusivistic ideas I was getting from the church, from the fact that I was living among Buddhists, my best friends were Buddhists, and what value they bring to me. So that was the thing that got me into graduate school and to seminary and then to graduate school. And from there into understanding religion as something that is very important to me. During the time I was at the National Council of Churches is when I first came to know about the Religion Communicators Council. And there was a time when it was still mostly Christian, I think, that it was moving out from its Christian base to include Jews and Muslims and others. So that was something that I'm glad that I helped orchestrate at some level. During that period also, I helped orchestrate together with a Jewish colleague a dialogue table between Christian denominational executives and Jewish uh, organizational executives. This was a table that was, as you can imagine, was fraught with tension, but we decided that rather than that we will not eliminate our political differences from the conversation, but that we will keep the conversation going, the theological conversations and the political conversation at the same time. And while doing so, when the tension got to be high, our agreement is that we will stay at the table, which stood us in very good stead because that way we were able to really get into some really deep issues, tense issues, difficult issues, but we broke through some important ground. Similarly, we created a roundtable with Muslim colleagues as well, but that was a very important part of my own formation, but our attempts to create the kind of religious dialogue that was incredibly meaningful. The The time I was at the World Council of Churches allowed me to expand that over to the international context. Of course, the context there is very different, and so including a variety of others. And one important thing that we worked on there was to say to ourselves, this is Christians talking among ourselves, that we cannot anymore do our theologizing without the participation and the presence of other religious colleagues. We said we have made too many mistakes doing that. So we need to run our theology by everybody else, at least through our friends, so as at least so that we will find what terrible mistakes we are doing along the way. This is prior to all of that. Couldn't tell you one other thing. Prior to all, I pastored a church in the south side of Chicago. At the time, I did a lot of work in community organizing. South side of Chicago is where community organizing as a discipline began. This is where Barack Obama comes from. I was
I
in
was
the
going to
same,
say very famously with one of our presidents.
right. He and I were in the same organization. He and I were trained by the same people. He was a little bit senior in that work to me, about a couple of years, but I knew him quite well at the time. I haven't talked to him since he became president, but at the time he was just one of us guys who was doing community organizing. So this was that's the background I bring. So I came back to Chicago and engaged with an organization that was a seminary consortium addressing urban pastoral education issues, understanding contextuality as the key value of our work. So, seminaries typically teach you top down theologies because they have to stay true to their tradition, of course. So, what people have theologized about 100 years ago, 500 years ago, that of theology. We said, no, we got to flip that question around and ask the question, how does theology begin from the ground up? That is, people in our cities, when they ask the question, what am I going to eat today? Or where am I going to live tomorrow? Or what am I going to do with my daughter who is sick? That's where the theological conversation begins. Okay, it doesn't begin by digesting Barth and Brunner and Bultmann and all those wonderful theologians. It begins with the questions that people are asking. That's what we attempted to do during the time of the Seminary Consortium for Urban Pastoral Education. That's a mouthful. It's a school scoop for for short. This brought us to the place where Omnia is today because Scoop needed to die in order for Omnia to emerge. It died for no other reason than we ran out of money. And fortunately, we had some people who gave us a little money to revision. And so we said, what we are doing currently is we are training seminary students. In the new iteration, we are going to train religious leaders who are currently in the field, not students. Currently, we are a Christian organization. In the new iteration, we are going to be an interfaith organization. Currently, we are a Chicago organization. In the new iteration, we are going to be a global organization. So during this conversation, we are sitting around and talking about, okay, how shall we do this? And we ask the question, what is the most difficult question in the interfaith world today? Okay. And we said to ourselves, the most difficult question is religious extremism. And we are to address that one. And we had a Nigerian gentleman sitting right next to us, and he said to us, if that's what you want to do, I know where I can take you. And he took us to northeast Nigeria. Northeast Nigeria, as you probably know, is infested with Boko Haram. You all know this. You all know about Boko Haram. It is one of the more brutal terrorist organizations in the world. It had a long history of terrorizing people in the Northeast, particularly in Gombe State, where we began our work. Okay, I'm going to tell you a couple of stories about Gombe State. Okay, the introduction that Ryan read to you was from several years ago. Sorry, Ryan, but those numbers have changed a lot. So we started in Nigeria, but we are now in 11 countries, including the United States. and we are more than 500 Interfaith Peacemaker teams. So very quickly, we decided that the reason why we have space for a Boko Haram is because there's a long-standing antagonism between Christian and Muslim communities. It has to do with decades-long wars and tribal conflicts and so on. But that is what has happened. So the two communities don't talk to each other. It is into that gap that a Boko Haram is able to come and recruit young people from that community. So the theory of change was, if you can bring these two communities together and get them to work together, then we can avoid Boko Haram, we'll reduce the space for Boko Haram to recruit. And that's how we wanted to address the question of religious extremism. Okay? So I want to show you, you all will appreciate this because you're communicators, I hope, and cautiously because of what happened to us earlier, I'm going to share with you a short video about our work, how our work in Nigeria started. Is that all right with you all?
Yes.
Okay.
And Shanta,
All
you
right.
should be able to.
Okay, here we go. Sorry, it's not playing. Oh, okay, here we go. I hope you can hear as well.
If they refuse to believe in our religion, we can come and put them in a room and put a fire. I use a fire in some rooms. A lot of that room. Being a children, there is a lot of children and old people in that place. If you kill any person, you will feel happy because you are a special person in the hereafter. If you are not a member, even a Muslim also is not a true believer. If you didn't believe with Boko Haram, you are not a believer. Your blood is allowed to shed.
Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa, with nearly 200 million people. 40% are Christian, 50% are Muslim, and 10% practice traditional African religions. As in many African nations, much of the religion is imported. Islam came to Nigeria mostly through migration, trade, and imperial rule. Christianity came by way of colonialism. Both found a home alongside African traditional religion, and for centuries they coexisted in relative peace. But in the last 2 decades, political extremist groups around the world, masquerading as religious organizations, have begun a worldwide terror campaign that have left thousands dead, millions in fear, and a growing suspicion between different faiths.
So as a result of the violence we've been experiencing in the northern part of the country, which takes religious dimension, we begin to ask ourselves what's really going wrong and what are those measures we can take.
At Reverend Kala's request, OMNIA sent a team to Nigeria to explore the possibilities of working to create new paradigms for peace building. Wherever they went, they were met with enthusiasm, both for their message and for their commitment to peace.
Not sentimentality, but solidarity, which means when there is something going on here that is concerning to you, it is concerning to us.
They listened to those most affected, including 4 widows whose husbands were murdered by Boko Haram.
I saw my husband lying down on the ground. They shoot him on his chest 3 times. I scream, nobody come out. After I tell them that, what did he do to you?
What is the deeper?
In a private gathering of Christian and Muslim leaders, the OMNIA team laid the foundation for their future work together. For some, It was the first time meeting with leaders of a different faith.
This day is a great day in the life of Gombe State because you have people that are coming from the states to stand shoulder to shoulder with us on the issue of peaceful coexistence. Because peace is a commodity that is very scarce, very precious, and elusive.
For me, I see OMNIA as an answer to the yearnings of my people. Looking forward to a common ground, coming together, envisioning a community where people of diverse faiths will come together and share ideas and bring growth and development to the state. You have idea, I have idea, come let's share this idea, and then we make things to work.
Helping to replace fear with joy, bringing an end to a season of suffering, and restoring the role of faith as a force for good. We're working together to make an impact for peace.
Some of you may have heard the name Vince Eisner. Vince used to work for the United Methodist Church. What's it? The Peace and Justice of in Washington D.C. as a communications. I believe he was a part of Religion Communicators Council at the time. So he's the one who made the video. I couldn't possibly make something like that. But you get the sense about how this thing began. Let me stop for a second, see if you might have a response to what you saw.
Well, I'm curious because in the video it talked about how it was the first time that people had met with religious leaders of different faiths, right? And I'm really curious about what that initial meeting, because that was you in the video, was it not? In the gray shirt, yeah.
Yeah.
So that initial meeting, like what were some of the stereotypes that were dispelled? What was some of the, do you know what I mean? The aha moments that were had by some of those participants?
Yeah, we didn't dispel all the myths, all the problems. People didn't know basics. Christians didn't know why Muslims prayed looking at a particular direction. Why were they facing this way and not that way? Muslims didn't know what is this Easter about. Basic questions like that, people didn't know about each other. And so I'm sure there are lots of questions like that that are still unanswered. But it was an issue of, the education came from people being able to share with each other, building those friendships. So let me move on then. Okay. By the way, Wesley, you wrote, yes, peace. Peace is a precious commodity. Yeah, particularly you all at the American Friends Service Committee and so on know that better than most others do, who are committed to that. I appreciate that very much. So here's the thing. What we soon recognized was that we ought to bring people together in small teams. And we decided that getting together about 20 people together would be really good. And when key religious leaders were able to come together, it was easy for the followers to come together because they knew their religious leaders were participating. They could also come. We also had politicians and civic leaders participating in those. So we created these interfaith peacemaker teams, Muslims and Christians together. And I brought my community organizing expertise into that conversation. And what was that? Basically to understand that building power is necessary for building peace. because you can't build peace. You can't do anything for that matter if you don't have power. How do you build power? You build power by, first of all, understanding that it is in your self-interest to do so, understanding that building relationships is key to building power. That is to say, understanding each other's self-interest and to see how they come to how those self-interests align in a way that people can work together on something. And then to figure, and not only with building relationships with our neighbors, but with people who are already in power. And so to be able to find alliances, and once you know that, once you do what we call one-on-one conversations with people in their communities, you get a sense about what people are really concerned about. And then you analyze, you do a power analysis and understand the issues that people are coming up with. And then you say to yourself, can we narrow these big problems down to small, narrow issues in such a way that we can see if the amount of power that we have can handle that issue? So you have an analysis of power, how much power we have, and you have an analysis of the issue. And if these two can come together, then you have an opportunity to do something. Our mantra around that is, when you think about an issue, is it urgent? Meaning, is there a deadline to this? Is it relevant? Meaning that is there a large number of people who are enthusiastic about that? And thirdly, is it winnable? If it is not winnable, in other words, if it doesn't fit those criteria, and clearly if it is not winnable, you don't undertake to do that. Why? Because if you do that and you lose the people you already have. If you do something and win, then you gain more people, thereby more power. If the understanding is that you need to build power in order to go for the ultimate price of getting peace, then you need to do things that will build power for your team. So we have built these teams, and we started off in Nigeria, and we went on now to 11 countries, 6 of them. Now, from next week onwards, it'll be 7 of them in Africa, 3 in Asia, and in the United States. So we are approximately 500 plus Interfaith Peacemaker teams in these countries. And most of them in marginalized communities, in rural communities, in villages, and in the cities, in marginalized communities within. And so we go to the margins for no other reason than that is where the most energy is to change things around. So, people who are hungry want things to change today, not tomorrow. They want things to change today. People who have things to eat don't want things to change. They want the status quo to remain. That's our argument. Therefore, we go to places of the margins. Okay, I'll tell you one story about Nigeria that might be interesting. Then I'm going to go on to what we are doing in the U.S. and what that means in the U.S. Let's see, 2017 December, we had a training in Nigeria, and we had 2 women. Well, we had a number of people, but 2 women sat next to each other, one a Christian, the other a Muslim. They came from the same village, and we trained them to do one-on-ones, and they did a one-on-one with each other and understood some things about each other that got them very excited. They said, I didn't know this about you, and I didn't know that you lived in the same village. We never got to talk to each other. So this is a great thing. When we go back to our village, shall we get other women to talk to each other about this and get them to build relationships also? And so with our encouragement, they went out and did that. And that was in December. But in March, when I went there, March of 2018, there were 22 women, 22, that is 11 pairs of women, Muslims and Christians, who came to meet me and said, we are now have done one-on-one conversations. We've become friends with each other. Now what should we do? Well, I said, well, you're still only 22 people. That's not a lot of people. So why don't you go do that more with other people in the community, other women in particular? Well, in October of that year when I went, there were 160 women. And they all gathered together in one room. And then they said to me, now what shall we do? I said, now you can actually figure out something. Now you can sit down and ask yourself, what is the most urgent, relevant, and winnable thing that you can do? So they agreed on several things. One is that there's an election coming up. Election was in 2019, February at the time. That's when the Mr. Buhari, who died just the other day, was elected. 2019 February was the election. So they had 4 months to do something. And they said, you know, what happens at every election is that there's election violence, and that election violence means somebody dies. Many people die during election violence. So we think we ought to do something to stop that. And they asked the question, they said, who wants to be the people who make that happen? The women. The women want to stop that. And so they, in January of that year, they brought together 3 gatherings of women, 1,000 women each. They did that by creating a community fair, community feast. They brought food together, they brought people together, they cooked together, they did all kinds of things. And they said to each, who does election violence? It's the men. It's our husbands and our sons. So we are going to say to them, if you undertake election violence, we are going to go on strike against you. And that means we are not going to cook for you and no sex for you. And then there's village square, and we are going to protest against you. So 3 gatherings of 1,000 women each did this. In Nigeria's Gombe state for that reason. In the 23 election, in the most recent one, 23 February, they did it statewide. And but this time targeting young people, because it's mostly young people who participate in election violence. And apart from a few skirmishes, they said there was no other election violence. That's a really good story, because what that we're talking about and made that happen. Today, Gombe State in Nigeria has 110 Interfaith Peacemaker teams. Today, Gombe State in Nigeria, in 2023, Gombe State in Nigeria became known as the second safest state in Nigeria in terms of murders or kidnappings. In 2024, Gombe became the state with the least number of Let me stop for a second. How does that sound to you?
So I think it's an amazing story, especially the power of people to do you know what I mean? Like these women, they were the ones that had the multiplier effect, and they reached out and they got more women involved, etc. Right? Um, I do have a question though, because you keep on talking about Muslims and Christians, and in the video we heard that 40% is Christian, 50% is Muslim, but 10% follow, indigenous religions. My question is, do they are there instances where there are also non-Muslims, non-Christians that are involved in this, or is it mostly just Muslims and Christians together?
It's mostly Muslims and Christians because those are the largest groups. The African traditional religions are not organized in the same way. In other words, it's much more of a cultural thing. Somebody said to me, it's not right to say that those statistics, you have to say 50% are Christian, 50% are Muslim, but 100% are African traditional religions. Yeah, it's like that. It's African traditional religion exudes everything. It's not such an organized activity like the other religious traditions.
And then at some point, I'm sure, with the 110 you said peacemaker teams,
Yes.
it's not just women anymore.
No,
How
no,
did you get men
no,
involved as
no, that's just
well?
one story.
Okay. Because I'm curious, like, if it was perceived as a women's organization, men would be probably less interested in joining, right?
No, yeah, no. It's been men to begin with, but this particular story has to do with women.
Okay.
A lot of men are involved, and young people are involved as well.
Okay.
So let me now move quickly on to say, because I know our time is off a little bit. Let me quickly go on to say, in other countries, in other contexts, the issues have been different. But the most predominant issue across the board has been food insecurity. Okay, because people are going hungry across Africa and in many parts of Asia. And right at the time of the pandemic, this was very intense because, a lot of people are, in many contexts, are daily wage earners. Daily wage earners could not go out and work, which meant they did not have money, which meant they did not have food for their families. So the Sri Lankan Interfaith Peacemaker teams decided that they will address this by going into a scheme of home agriculture, what they call the home agriculture projects, which means that which is that they got people in the local university agriculture department to come and train people about how to do, yes, using traditional agricultural methods, but how to adapt them to the climate change context in which they are living in, and which is going to get even more intense over the years. So, what kind of crops? How do you adjust for the times when there are long periods of drought followed by torrential rains? How do you prepare the ground for that? What kind of entrepreneurial methods are there that you can not only feed your family, but you can actually grow more in terms of cash crops, spices, flowers, and so on that can be sold? All of that took place with specialized training. Currently, 76 families and community gardens are there in Sri Lanka from that project, which is now copied in Kenya, Uganda, Togo, Liberia, and other places. Because that became the most critical issue. We have a team of experts here in the US who are scientists, who are agriculture specialists, who are climate change specialists, who are addressing the question so that and providing support for those communities. You're right. Food insecurity is rising in the US, and so we are going to have to deal with that here as well. So briefly on that one, any other thoughts about that? In Bangladesh, the other major issue that the IP teams are dealing with, particularly in Bangladesh, the question of patriarchy has come to the forefront. Gender-based violence, child marriage, uh, uh, trafficking of young women has been a very serious problem. This is legitimized by religion. A lot of this, and so or religion or religious culture. So how do you break that is a very serious question that they are trying to deal with. In a context where fundamentalist religion predominates in the country, in several of these places where that is a part of the problem. Okay.
Shanta, one of the things that strikes me is how, when we as communications professionals, when we think of communications, we typically think of like mass communication. But
Yes.
your example is such that one-on-one communication of how, each one teach one, each one reach one, and get them engaged. And that
Right.
grassroots effort, I think, is fascinating and it's successful with what you're doing.
Well, here's the thing, though, Jeannie. We do use mass communication methods. I mean, a lot of our things are on local television because we always try to get the local television station to our actions, whatever we do, and even our trainings, so that our intention is to create an environment where pluralism is affirmed. And that can be affirmed only through mass communication. So that if people are hearing that Muslims and Christians in Nigeria or Buddhists and Hindus in Sri Lanka are coming together and doing something, right? And they're actually winning, then what happens is that the idea of pluralism gets more currency in the community because it's on television now, it's in the newspaper now, right? So we do use those media. Do you all have time for me to go into what we are doing in the US since we lost some time?
Yeah, I think so. I think that would be interested because everybody on the call is based in the US.
Okay, I am having difficulty uploading those documents to the chat, so I might have to send it to you all because
Well, if you email them to either myself or Jenny, then we can
right.
put them in the chat too.
Because it goes to the Google Drive and Dropbox and so on, it won't let me access my computer. So I'll email this to you. There are 3 or 4
Okay,
documents.
and we can email them out after the fact too.
Correct. So here's what I wanted to say about that. We asked ourselves, we have a successful model that's working in many different countries. By the way, the extremism question, or religious extremism question, is an issue in many of these countries. It's not just in Nigeria. In Sri Lanka, it's a question. Bangladesh is a question. In many of the countries in Africa, it's a question. So they are all trying to deal with that in their own way by coming together and doing something and building power in order to make that happen. We asked ourselves, this has been difficult for us to do in the United States for this reason, and that is that in the United States, people are comfortable. In other words, we don't feel the pinch of hunger. At least some parts of the communities do, but we don't. People we typically deal with don't necessarily feel that, and we don't feel the pinch of extremism in the same way that Nigerians feel it. Except now. Now we are feeling it a lot more than when we used to do. Those days we were content to watch television and engage in our video games and our phones and everything else. But now we are all very aware that we are in a difficult position and that there is no way to get out of it until next election cycle comes or whatever it is. So we all understand that in a much deeper way than we used to. So we said to ourselves, maybe it is time to make this happen in the United States. Remember, we've gone to we started always with religious communities, and we've had some difficulty thinking about that in the United States also, because in the United States it's a little more challenging for people to come together in local communities unless something happens there. So yes, religion has been used to support the tragedies in the world. This is really true, and that's a part of the problem that we are dealing with as well. We know that there is an extremism in the United States. The white Christian nationalism is an extremism. Christian Zionism is an extremism. We asked ourselves the question, where do these two things connect? And we discovered that there's a common narrative that they are like two sides of the same coin, because both of them have to do with supremacy. One kind of supremacy or the other. And we had said for a long time that supremacy is the one thing that keeps us from engaging in peacemaking. If there's one big obstacle to peacemaking, it is our attitudes of supremacy. The problem is that religions typically have attitudes of supremacy. Our tribal identities have attitudes of supremacy. And as long as we have that, we have difficulty. So a few years ago, we came up with what we called a declaration on anti-supremacy. And we said we are going to be an anti-supremacist organization. That is to say, not a non-supremacist organization, which we thought was a neutral position, to be non-supremacist. We said we ought to be anti-supremacist, meaning that we will actively work against supremacies. This is a difficult question, because the fact of the matter is many of our constituency, many of our religious communities are supremacist in its structure, in the way that they have organized themselves. So we have a tension there. We have a contradiction we have to deal with. But we said to ourselves, we ourselves and all our Interfaith Peacemaker teams will work hard to try and live into the attitudes or the values of anti-supremacy. Now, this is not easy, because in many places in Africa, there's a male supremacy. In many places in Africa, religious supremacy goes off against each other, and tribal supremacies are problematic. All kinds of supremacies are there that are ingrained into the cultural fabric. And we said to ourselves, we are going to create an alternative community that will turn that thing on its head. So, can we do this in the US? I don't know. But that's our hope. So we got into this a few months ago by trying to address these two, what we call ideological myths, Christian supremacy and white Christian nationalism. Our teams have now begun to do a lot of work on that. We have explored those, we have learned about those, and now we have broken off into 3 different groups groupings of that. One about building IP teams in the US. One about creating content around Christian Zionism and white Christian nationalism. But not only just creating content, but curating and disseminating content that is already there. We think that preachers don't know to preach about this. we think that communicators need to learn about this, to communicate about it to their constituencies. And then the third one is to create what we call a new Powell memo. You may know about the Powell memo from 1971, written by Judge Lewis Powell, Supreme Court Justice later on. But his memo is the thing that sparked a conservative movement that ended up with the Gingrich Revolution of 1990. Well, first by the fundamentalist takeover of the Southern Baptist Convention, later by the Gingrich Revolution of 1994, later by Trump. So that was a document that sparked a generational, couple of generations long movement. The question is, how do we create a similar movement? How do we spark a similar movement that is anti-supremacist? So that's what we are beginning to work on. And then we have a climate justice Interfaith Peacemaker team and a patriarchy Interfaith Peacemaker team. Those are the ones that we have in the United States now. Those are all Zoom based at the moment, right? There are two that are location based, both in Illinois, in Chicago suburbs, but they are meeting in different locations. But we have just started here in the US. And so we think that over the next several years, we will be able to build it and make that happen. I think I better stop there.
So I do have one question. Are you trying to tap into existing interfaith councils, or are you looking at creating different and new networks?
There are lots of places where there are no interfaith councils. Where there are interfaith councils and they would like to partner with us, we'll be happy to do so. I've been an interfaith council person for a long time, but I also know that interfaith councils typically don't want to engage in building power. They typically prefer to do things like food pantries and housing projects and things that people can easily do. What we are proposing is more difficult, more challenging, and will take people out of their comfort zones.
And do you also use it to address like Islamophobia and
Yes.
and anti-Semitism, like on a community level versus just like,
Yes, of course.
because like how do you do that?
Well, all of those racisms, that is Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, all of that is a part of the supremacist attitudes that people have. So the hate itself, I mean, those are generated by the values or attitudes of hate, are supremacist attitudes. I am better than you, so I'm quite capable of and are willing to hurt you in order to get my way. So when I said anti-supremacy rather than non-supremacy, meaning that we are actively against those supremacies. That's the attitude that we will take to the Interfaith Peacemaker teams.
And you said that in the United States, it's mostly on Zoom. Right now, you have the two in-person locations, but it's mostly on Zoom. Is that just available on the OMNIA website, or like how to attend those?
No, no, it's not on the website because it's just too new. I'll get you get you all of that information if you wanted to.
Okay.
I'm happy to invite you. I'm happy to put you on my mailing list so you will get an occasional email from me telling you exactly when these things are. Ginny is on my list now, and I hope she's happy with it.
I'm learning a lot, and I'm liking like the little subgroup that I'm on. It's interesting. I have done several the one-on-one conversations, the power conversations, and it's very interesting how like at first you think, I don't really have much in common with this person who you don't know, and by the end of the conversation, there's so much overlap and concentric circles, and that was fascinating to me. So.
Yes. Jane Lucas asked a question. Would you like to ask it, Jane, or do you just want me to answer it?
I was just based on the information that you gave on what it would entail. You said like it wouldn't necessarily be like food pantries and stuff like that. And so I was just wondering if the type of activism that you're looking into is more based on civil disobedience, nonviolent resistance, things like that. Because you
Yes, of
talked
course.
about power. You mentioned power at some point, and so that was my question.
Yes, of course. Now, see, we are not activists in the same sense that you see activists coming together to do a protest. We are much more strategic. In other words, we have a critique of protest movements that crop up suddenly. They do have value. It actually can deliver some results. And we've seen them deliver results, no question. But they don't have staying power. They don't have long-lasting sustaining power. You know why that is? Because there's no base organization to sustain them. What we are doing is we are creating the base organization. So when we create the base organization, so just take Gombe State as an example, because that's the one place where we have the largest number of IP teams. Now, they will do protests. They have done protests, and they have actually held the government to account. There was a time, there was an issue when the government was hoarding food because the food production companies wanted them to hoard in order that they can sell it later at a higher price. Okay, so that was the trick. The IP teams protested, went on protest into the government, but it was a very strategic move addressing one very urgent, relevant, and winnable action, right? That's what we will do, and we will support protests that are going on. I still go on these protests, but we know that the results that you get out of that is limited and will come up like this and go down like that. So what you want to do is to create a sustaining network that will sustain the movement. So it's more strategic, if that's helpful, Jane.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Any other tidbits that you want to give us before we wrap this up?
Well, I'll tell you what, I only scratched the surface here. There's a lot of stories.
No,
You can
totally.
imagine 500 IP teams actually working in their own communities can come up with 500 stories every month, right? So there's a lot of stories, a lot of victories that they are doing that require wide dissemination.
Yeah.
We need wide dissemination because they are good stories, and they can tell you. See, one of the important things that happens that I think you as churches in particular, but religious communities in general, ought to pay attention to, is that when we go out into the community and we do things that the people in the community want us to do, and we win, an important shift happens in the community. They begin to look at the church or the mosque or the synagogue and they say, oh, those people are doing something that is important to us. We need to support them. We need to go there. We need to be their friends. What a huge difference, right? This is how you reach out to the community and become relevant to the community. And when you become relevant to the community will not let you die.
Yeah.
How many churches must hear that? Hear that? I mean, some 5,000 churches are dying every year in the United States, or more than that. But that's something that the churches need to hear so badly, that if they engage with their community, the community will not let them die. Because they'll
We
be.
got one more question if you can answer it in 1 minute.
Go
It's
ahead.
in the chat.
Oh,
What
sorry.
is good advice you would give to counter discouragement when trying to make good change in the world and make our impact more sustainable? So how do we keep our spirits up when it doesn't seem to be going so well?
Two things. One is we always work in teams. Okay, we never work alone. If you work alone, it's very hard. And it's very hard to keep your spirits up. It's easy to get discouraged. When you work together, you are accountable to each other. Accountability means that you will pull each other up at times of discouragement. And you will agitate each other to do the right thing for yourself and for the team. That's number one. Second, perhaps this is number one. You work on the basis, everything that you do is on the basis of your long-term self-interest. One of the first things that we do is to begin to reflect on our own self-interest. What brings us here? What motivates us? What is it that we need to become in order to fulfill our vision for the world? That's the question of self-interest. It's based on our values, our vision, and our vocation. That's a whole nother story we can get into another time. But because it's based on your self-interest, the motivation for engagement comes from within, from inside. It is a force that arises that you can't help but engage in. And so that is there. That's number one, actually. The second is that your team is there to sustain you, to agitate you, to push you forward in order that you might fulfill your own self-interest.
Yeah. I really like that emphasis that you do it in teams, right? It's part of what I like about the RCC is that it is a team that's working together and trying to do good together, despite setbacks sometimes. Shanta, this was fantastic. It was really fascinating and eye-opening. Like I came away from our conversation the other day in preparation for this event, enthusiastic about hearing you, and it was even more so today. I really appreciate it, and I hope that a lot of our members will take a look at the recording afterwards. Thank you so much for your time today. Thanks to everybody that was joining. I apologize once again for the mishap at the top of the meeting. But we will look forward to next month's webinar, which will be on August 13th. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Join us if you would. And Ginny will let us, or Ryan, I'll send you those documents so you can share with each other.
Great.
Yes,
Thank
of
you.
course.
All right. All
Yes,
the
of
best.
course.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Be well.